she whispered. "One bed, no rules." And slid under the sheets without hesitation. Maya stood in the hotel lobby, shaking snow from her coat and wondering how her life had become such a mess. The wedding was tomorrow, and she was supposed to be excited. Instead, she was exhausted, cold, and desperately hoping she could just get to her room and forget this entire day existed. The drive from Seattle had taken twice as long because of the storm, and now her fingers were so numb she could barely hold her phone. The hotel clerk looked apologetic as she typed on her computer. Maya waited, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Behind her, she heard footsteps and turned to see someone she hadn't expected. Ryan. Of course it would be Ryan. Her ex-husband's closest friend, the guy who used to come over every Sunday for football games, the one who always made her laugh even when things at home were falling apart. They hadn't spoken since the divorce 3 years ago. Not a single text, not a phone call, nothing. Psst. He stopped when he saw her, his expression shifting from surprise to something she couldn't quite read. They stared at each other for a moment before the clerk cleared her throat. Maya turned back to the desk, her heart beating faster than it should. The clerk looked even more uncomfortable now. She explained that the hotel had made a terrible mistake with their booking system. The storm had brought in more guests than expected, and they were completely full. Breath. Every room was taken. Well, almost every room. There was one room left. Just one. And it had a single queen-sized bed. The reservation was non-refundable, already paid for by the wedding party. Maya felt her stomach drop. She looked back at Ryan, who was clearly hearing all of this too. The clerk kept apologizing, saying she'd called every other hotel in the area. Everything was booked solid because of the storm. The roads were closed now too. No, one could leave even if they wanted to. Maya's mind raced through all the complications. Ryan had been her husband's best friend since college. When the marriage ended, everyone had to pick sides, and Ryan had picked her ex-husband. At least, that's what she'd assumed. He'd vanished from her life so completely that she figured he blamed her for everything. The divorce had been ugly, full of accusations and hurt feelings. Her ex-husband had convinced himself that she'd been having an affair with Ryan, which was ridiculous and painful and had poisoned everything. Ryan stepped closer to the desk, his voice quiet. He asked the clerk if she was absolutely sure there were no other options. She nodded, showing him the computer screen. Maya could see other guests in the lobby, all looking frustrated and tired. Some were already camped out on the couches, resigned to sleeping in public spaces. The storm wasn't letting up. Through the windows, she could see snow falling so thick that the streetlights barely cut through it. She made a decision before she could overthink it. Maya reached for the key card, her fingers brushing against Ryan's hand as he reached for it at the same time. They both pulled back. She grabbed the card and turned to face him, properly for the first time. 3 years had changed him a little. His hair was shorter, and there were new lines around his eyes. But he still had that same steady presence that had always made her feel safe, even when everything else was chaos.
They didn't speak as they walked to the elevator. The silence felt heavy, full of 3 years of unspoken words and unanswered questions.
Maya pressed the button for the 4th floor and watched the numbers light up as they climbed. She could feel Ryan standing beside her, could sense his discomfort matching her own. This was going to be the longest night of her life. The room was smaller than she'd hoped. One bed dominated the space, leaving barely enough room to walk around it. There was a tiny bathroom, a broken heater that rattled but produced no warmth, and a window that showed nothing but swirling snow. Psst. Ryan immediately dropped his bag and pulled out his phone, presumably to look for alternatives. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of how tired she was. Ryan broke the silence first. He offered to sleep on the floor. Maya looked at the thin carpet and felt guilty. It was freezing in the room, and the floor looked about as comfortable as concrete. She told him it was fine. They could figure something out. They were both adults. They could handle one night in the same room. He didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. They established rules without really discussing them. Ryan stayed on his side of the room, organizing his things. Aya stayed on hers, pretending to check her phone. Neither of them mentioned the elephant in the room, all that history hanging between them like a curtain. Psst. The temperature kept dropping. Maya pulled on an extra sweater, then another. Her teeth started chattering. Around 11 o'clock, she could see Ryan's breath in the air. This was going to be a very long, very cold night. Midnight came and went. Maya lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, shivering despite 2 sweaters and her coat. Across the room, Ryan sat in the chair, his arms wrapped around himself. Neither of them had said much in the past hour. The silence had become almost comfortable, or at least familiar. But the cold was getting dangerous. Maya could barely feel her toes anymore. Bad. She sat up, making a decision that probably wasn't wise but felt necessary. Her voice came out quieter than she intended when she finally spoke. She told Ryan this was ridiculous. They were going to freeze if they kept pretending they could survive the night apart. Breath. He looked at her, clearly torn between relief and hesitation. Maya pulled back the covers and moved to one side of the bed. She whispered those words that would change everything between them.
One bed, no rules. Then she slid under the sheets without waiting for his response.
Ryan stood there for a long moment, clearly fighting with himself. But the cold won out over pride. He grabbed his pillow and joined her, staying carefully on his side. There was at least a foot of space between them. Maya could feel the warmth from his body, though, and it was the first time she'd felt warm in hours. They both lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to pretend this wasn't incredibly awkward. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Neither of them could sleep. The room was too quiet, the situation too strange. Fast. Finally, Ryan spoke. His voice was soft, almost careful, boorish. He asked how she'd been. Really been, not just the polite answer people give at parties. Psst. Maya wasn't sure where to start. 3 years was a long time to summarize. She told him about moving to a new apartment, about changing jobs, about slowly rebuilding her life after everything fell apart. It felt strange to be talking to him after so long, but it also felt right somehow. Ryan listened without interrupting, the way he always used to. When she finished, it was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking too. He told her things she hadn't known, about how hard it had been watching her marriage fall apart, about feeling helpless because he could see what was happening but couldn't fix it, about the arguments he'd had with her ex-husband, trying to make him see reason. Maya turned her head to look at him, surprised. She'd always assumed Ryan had sided with her ex-husband automatically. That's what friends did, right? They stuck together. But Ryan shook his head. He explained that he'd tried to stay neutral at first. Tried to be there for both of them. But her ex-husband had made that impossible. He'd started demanding that Ryan choose sides, cut off contact with Maya completely. When Ryan refused, things got ugly between them two. Their friendship had fallen apart almost as badly as the marriage had. Maya felt something shift inside her chest. All this time, she'd thought Ryan had abandoned her, that he'd believed all the terrible things her ex-husband had said about her. Best. She'd been so hurt by his silence that she'd never questioned it, never reached out to ask why he'd disappeared. She'd just accepted it as another loss, in a year full of losses. Ryan kept talking, his words coming faster now like he'd been holding them in for too long. He admitted something that made Maya's breath catch. He said he'd had feelings for her for years. Not the kind of feelings a friend should have for his best friend's wife. He'd buried them deep, never acted on them, never even hinted at them. But they'd been there, making everything more complicated than it should have been. When her ex-husband started accusing her of having an affair with Ryan, it had been based on nothing but jealousy and insecurity. But it had still forced Ryan to face the truth about his own feelings. He'd felt guilty for even having those feelings, even though he'd never crossed any lines. So when the divorce happened, he'd removed himself from the situation completely. It seemed like the right thing to do, the honorable thing. But it had been one of the hardest things he'd ever done. Maya didn't know what to say. She'd suspected once or twice that Ryan might have feelings for her, but she'd convinced herself she was imagining things. She'd been married. Those kinds of thoughts weren't allowed. So she'd pushed them away and focused on trying to fix her failing marriage. Now, lying here in the dark, with 3 years of distance between then and now, she could finally admit the truth. She'd had feelings for Ryan, too. The confession hung in the air between them. Maya explained how lonely her marriage had been toward the end. How her ex-husband's jealousy had poisoned everything. How he'd accused her of betraying him when she'd never even thought about it. Well, not seriously. Maybe there had been moments when she'd wondered what life might be like with someone like Ryan. Someone kind and steady and easy to talk to. But wondering wasn't the same as doing. She'd been faithful, had tried so hard to make her marriage work. It hadn't been enough. Ryan shifted closer, closing some of that careful distance between them. Not touching, but closer. He told her he was sorry. Sorry for disappearing. Sorry for not being there when she probably needed a friend most. Sorry for all the complicated feelings that had made everything messier. Maya found herself apologizing too, though she wasn't entirely sure what for. Maybe for not reaching out. For assuming the worst. For letting 3 years pass without trying to understand what had really happened. Their hands found each other in the darkness. Just fingers, touching at first, then palms pressing together. It felt both terrifying and right. Maya's heart was racing. This changed things. This changed everything. But maybe, she thought, that wasn't such a bad thing. Morning light filtered through the curtains too early. Maya woke up confused for a moment, not recognizing the room. Then she remembered everything. The storm, the hotel, Ryan lying next to her. She turned her head carefully and found him already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, reality crashed back in. Today was the wedding. Maya sat up quickly, her mind already racing through everything that needed to happen. Pay. She was the maid of honor. She had responsibilities. A whole day of photos and ceremonies and reception activities. And Ryan would be there too, as one of the groomsmen, along with her ex-husband, who definitely did not need to know that she and Ryan had spent the night in the same bed, even if nothing had happened beyond talking and holding hands. Panic started to set in. What had she been thinking? This was messy and complicated and potentially disastrous. She started pulling away, building walls again. It was a defense mechanism she'd perfected over the past 3 years. When things got too real, too vulnerable, she retreated. She got up and started gathering her things, talking too fast about needing to get ready, about how they should probably forget last night ever happened, about how it was just the cold and the circumstances making them both act strange. Ryan sat up, watching her pace around the tiny room. He didn't say anything at first, just let her ramble. Maya kept talking, convincing herself more than him. This didn't change anything. They'd just been 2 old friends catching up. That's all. They could go back to their separate lives after today. It would be fine. Everything would be fine. Then Ryan said her name. Just once, but in a tone that made her stop moving and look at him. He looked tired but determined. Best, he told her he was done. Done hiding, done pretending, done living his life based on what other people thought he should do. Bah. He'd spent 3 years being loyal to a friendship that had turned toxic, protecting someone who didn't deserve it, and avoiding someone who did. He wasn't going to waste any more time. Bear. He asked her a question that cut through all her defenses. What did she actually want? But not what was appropriate or safe or expected by everyone else. Not what would avoid awkwardness or judgment. What did Maya herself want, if she was being completely honest? She opened her mouth to give some safe answer, but no words came out, because the truth was complicated and scary and went against every rule of proper behavior she'd been taught. Maya sat back down on the bed, her hands shaking slightly. She admitted she didn't know how to answer that question. She'd spent so many years doing what was expected, being the good wife, the understanding friend, the person who kept peace and made everyone else comfortable. She'd lost track of what she actually wanted somewhere along the way. The divorce had been about escaping something that was hurting her, but she hadn't figured out what she was moving toward. Ryan moved closer, but gave her space to think. He said he understood that. He'd been doing the same thing, living according to other people's rules and expectations. But last night had reminded him what it felt like to be honest. To say true things even when they were difficult. To stop pretending. He didn't want to go back to the way things were before. He wanted to at least try to build something real, even if it was messy and complicated. The problem was the wedding. Her ex-husband would be there. People who knew their whole history would be there. Everyone would have opinions about Maya and Ryan showing up together. Her ex-husband would probably make a scene. He was good at that, at making himself the victim of every situation. Maya could already imagine the comments, the whispered conversations, the drama that would overshadow what should be their friend's happy day. Ryan acknowledged all of that. He wasn't naive about how difficult it might be, but he also pointed out that they couldn't live their lives forever trying to avoid her ex-husband's reactions. Bet that guy had controlled enough of their choices already. Maybe it was time to stop letting him have that power. Maya wanted to argue, but she couldn't find solid ground to stand on. Because he was right. She'd been making decisions based on her ex-husband's potential reactions for years, even after the divorce. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both thinking. Maya felt something shift inside her. Maybe it was exhaustion or courage, or just being tired of being afraid. Breaths. She looked at Ryan and made a decision. She told him she wanted to try. Whatever trying meant. She didn't have it all figured out, and she was definitely scared of the complications ahead. But she was tired of living small, tired of protecting everyone else's feelings while ignoring her own. Ryan smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd seen him in the lobby. It transformed his whole face. Maya felt her own smile answering his. Then they both started laughing, partly from relief and partly from the absurdity of the situation. They had roughly 3 hours to get ready for a wedding where they'd have to face everyone, including the one person most likely to make things difficult. But for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like maybe she could handle whatever came next. They decided to tell their friend, the bride, first. She deserved to know before walking into any potential drama at her own wedding. Maya was nervous about that conversation, but it felt like the right thing to do. The bride had been supportive during the divorce, had stayed neutral when others were choosing sides. If anyone would understand, it would be her. Ryan agreed, and they made plans to catch her before the ceremony started. The shower helped clear Maya's head. Standing under hot water, she thought about the past 24 hours and how much had changed. Yesterday morning, she'd been dreading this wedding, dreading seeing Ryan again, dreading all the old feelings and old wounds. Bath. Now she was nervous for completely different reasons. Good reasons, maybe. Scary reasons, definitely. But the kind of fear that came with possibility rather than dread. The bride's suite was full of laughter and champagne, and friends helping with last-minute details. Maya knocked hesitantly, feeling like an intruder in all that joy. Bride. Lisa looked up from her makeup chair and immediately knew something was different. She'd known Maya too long not to notice. She asked everyone else to give them a moment. And suddenly the room was quiet. Maya didn't know where to start. She'd practiced what to say in her head during the drive over, but all those careful words had vanished, so she just told the truth, straight and simple. She and Ryan had ended up sharing a room because of the storm and the hotel mix-up. They talked all night. Really talked for the first time in 3 years, and feelings had come up. Old feelings that had been buried for a long time. They wanted to try being honest about those feelings instead of hiding them anymore. She waited for Lisa's reaction, prepared for concern or worry, or requests to please not cause drama on her wedding day. Instead, Lisa started laughing. Not mean laughter, but genuine amusement mixed with something like relief. She told Maya she'd been hoping this would happen for years. Since before the divorce, actually. Lisa had watched Maya's marriage fall apart, had seen how her ex-husband's jealousy was destroying something that was already broken. She'd also seen how Maya and Ryan looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Maya was shocked. She'd thought she'd been so careful, so proper. But Lisa shook her head. She explained that real friends notice things. Breath. She'd known Maya was unhappy in her marriage long before Maya seemed willing to admit it to herself. And she'd known Ryan was miserable watching it all happen. When the divorce finally happened, Lisa had hoped they'd eventually find their way to each other. But then Ryan had disappeared. And Maya had built walls around herself, and everyone just moved on without dealing with the truth. The relief Maya felt was overwhelming, She'd been so worried about ruining Lisa's day, about causing problems or making things awkward. But Lisa was genuinely happy for them. But her only concern was Maya's ex-husband. He was going to be difficult about this. That was almost guaranteed. Lisa wanted to make sure Maya and Ryan were prepared for whatever scene he might cause. She offered to have security nearby, to seat him far away from them, to do whatever would help. Ryan arrived then, knocking softly before entering. Pay. Lisa welcomed him with a hug and congratulations that made him blush. She told them both the same thing she'd just told Maya. She'd been rooting for them longer than they knew. But she also gave them a gentle warning. Her soon-to-be husband was still friends with Maya's ex-husband. Not close friends anymore, but they still talked occasionally. There would be tension today. People would notice if Maya and Ryan arrived together or sat together. Some would gossip. Others would judge. It wouldn't be easy. Maya and Ryan looked at each other, having a silent conversation. Then Ryan said something that surprised them both. He suggested they not hide anything. Not make a big announcement, but also not pretend they were strangers. They could arrive separately to avoid causing a scene. But if they wanted to talk or sit together, they should. If people asked questions, they could answer honestly. They'd spent enough time hiding and pretending. Lisa agreed, saying that living authentically was always better than performing for others. The ceremony was beautiful. Maya stood at the front as maid of honor, trying to focus on her duties instead of scanning the crowd for Ryan. She could feel eyes on her, though. People who knew the history, who were probably wondering why she was there at all given that the groom was still friendly with her ex-husband. She kept her head high and her smile genuine. This was Lisa's day, and Maya refused to let old drama ruin it. She saw her ex-husband during the processional. But he was seated several rows back, his expression sour even during the happy ceremony. Maya felt that old familiar anxiety start to build, the way it always did when she had to be around him. But then she caught Ryan's eye from across the aisle, and something settled inside her. She didn't have to face this alone anymore. That thought steadied her through the rest of the ceremony. The reception was harder. Her ex-husband had clearly been drinking. Maya saw him watching her during dinner, his expression getting more hostile as the evening progressed. She stuck close to Lisa, helping with small details and avoiding direct confrontation. But she knew it was coming. Some part of her had known all day that he wouldn't let this go without comment. It happened at the bar. Maya was getting a drink when her ex-husband appeared beside her. His words were slurred, but cruel. He made accusations, brought up old fights, said things designed to hurt and humiliate her. Maya felt herself shrinking, falling back into old patterns of trying to de-escalate and avoid making scenes. Then Ryan appeared at her side. He didn't touch her, didn't make threats. He just stood there, solid and calm, and told her ex-husband to walk away. For a moment, it could have gone badly. Her ex-husband looked ready to start a real fight. But the best man and another groomsman appeared, gently guiding him away from the bar. Aya realized Lisa must have positioned people around the reception specifically to handle this kind of situation. The thought made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. Her friend had been protecting her all along. Ryan asked if she was okay. Maya wasn't sure how to answer. She was shaken but also strangely okay. Usually interactions with her ex-husband left her feeling small and wrong and guilty for things she hadn't done. But this time felt different. Maybe because she wasn't alone. Maybe because she was finally starting to believe she deserved better than his treatment. Maybe both. They ended up on the terrace outside the reception hall, away from the noise and the tension. The storm had passed, leaving everything covered in clean white snow. Maya pulled her shawl tighter and leaned against the railing. Ryan stood beside her, not pushing for conversation, but making his presence known. After a few minutes, Maya started talking. She told him she was tired of being afraid of her ex-husband's reactions. Tired of letting that fear control her choices. She'd done that during their marriage, and she'd kept doing it after the divorce without even realizing it. Ryan listened, then shared his own realization. He'd been living his life trying to be loyal to a friendship that had become toxic years ago. Beck, trying to be the good friend, the steady one, the one who didn't rock boats. But that version of loyalty had cost him too much. It had cost him happiness, had cost him the chance to be honest about his feelings, had cost him years of hiding. He didn't want to do that anymore. 6 months had passed since that snowy weekend in Portland. Maya sat in her new apartment, looking at the moving boxes still stacked in the corner. She and Ryan had decided to move in together 2 months ago, and they were still settling into the shared space. It felt both natural and terrifying. They'd taken things slowly after the wedding, dating properly, figuring out who they were as a couple instead of as two people with complicated history. The fallout from the wedding had been about as bad as expected. Her ex-husband had told anyone who would listen that he'd been right all along, that Maya and Ryan had been having an affair during the marriage. Some people believed him. Maya had lost a few friendships over it. People who either believed the lies or just didn't want to deal with the drama. It had hurt. But Lisa had stood by her, and so had other friends who actually mattered. The ones who knew the truth, or who at least trusted Maya enough to believe her side of the story. Ryan had lost his oldest friend. That had been the hardest part for him. His friendship with Maya's ex-husband was truly over now, burned beyond any hope of repair. There were nights when Ryan seemed sad about it, mourning what they'd once had, even though he knew the friendship had been dying for years. Maya understood that. She'd had to grieve her marriage twice, once when it ended, and again when she finally let go of hoping they could at least be civil to each other. But there were good things too. Great things. Maya had learned what it felt like to be with someone who actually listened to her, who wanted to know what she thought and felt instead of telling her what she should think and feel. Ryan challenged her sometimes, disagreed with her when he saw things differently, but he did it respectfully. He didn't make her feel small for having opinions. It was such a simple thing, but it made all the difference. They'd established rules for their relationship early on. Complete honesty, even when the truth was uncomfortable. That was rule number 1, patience. They'd both spent too much time hiding things, and they refused to build something new on that same shaky foundation. So they talked about everything, about fears and insecurities, about what they wanted from life, about the small annoyances that could become big problems if left unspoken. Rule number 2 was choosing each other deliberately, every single day. Ryan had suggested this one. He said love was great, but commitment was a choice that had to be made over and over. They promised to keep making that choice actively, not just coasting along on habit or convenience. It meant checking in with each other regularly, making sure they were both still happy, still growing, still wanting the same things. Rule number 3 was protecting their relationship from outside pressure and judgment. This one had become necessary after the wedding. Too many people had opinions about their relationship. Some said they'd moved too fast. Others said they should have waited longer after Maya's divorce. A few thought they were proving her ex-husband right by being together at all. Maya and Ryan had learned to set boundaries around those voices. To listen to advice from people they trusted but filter out the noise from everyone else. Maya kept the hotel key card from that snowy night in Portland. It sat in her nightstand drawer, a reminder of the night everything changed. Sometimes she'd take it out and turn it over in her hands, thinking about how scared she'd been that night and how different things looked now. She'd been so worried about doing the right thing, about what people would think, about protecting everyone's feelings except her own. That night had taught her something important about being brave. Ryan found her one evening holding that key card, lost in thought. He sat down beside her on the bed and asked what she was thinking about. Maya told him the truth. She was thinking about how sometimes the right person was there all along, waiting until you were both finally ready. They'd both needed time to grow and heal. She'd needed to leave her marriage and rebuild herself. He'd needed to let go of a friendship that wasn't serving him and figure out what he actually wanted from life. If they'd gotten together earlier, it probably wouldn't have worked. They weren't ready. The timing would have been wrong, and all that unresolved baggage would have poisoned whatever they tried to build. But that night in the hotel, cold and tired, and finally honest with each other, they'd both been ready. Ready to be vulnerable, ready to take risks, ready to stop living according to everyone else's rules.
Ryan agreed.
He said some of his friends still thought they'd made a mistake, that this relationship was built on drama and would eventually fall apart. But those friends didn't see what he saw. They didn't see how happy Maya was when she laughed now. Really laughed instead of that polite sound she used to make. They didn't see how much lighter he felt not carrying around secrets and buried feelings. They weren't there for the quiet morning conversations, or the way they'd learned to handle disagreements without anyone feeling attacked. Maya thought about her ex-husband sometimes. Not with longing or regret, but with a strange kind of gratitude. His jealousy and accusations had been painful and damaging, but they'd also forced her to face truths she'd been avoiding. She hadn't been happy in that marriage. She'd been trying to be someone she wasn't, constantly walking on eggshells, always working to keep peace instead of being herself. His accusations about Ryan had been wrong, but they'd made her realize that she deserved a different kind of relationship. Fast, one built on trust and respect instead of control and suspicion. The wedding invitations sat on their kitchen counter. Another friend getting married. Another event where they'd have to navigate social dynamics and potential awkwardness. But Maya wasn't dreading this one. She and Ryan would go together, openly and honestly. If people had questions, they'd answer them. If people wanted to judge, let them judge. Maya was done shrinking herself to fit other people's expectations. Protect. Ryan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He asked if she was ready for the wedding next month. Maya thought about it for a moment, then nodded. She was ready. Not because everything was perfect or because all the complications had magically disappeared, but because she'd learned something important over the past 6 months. She'd learned that doing the right thing for yourself sometimes meant disappointing other people, that being happy sometimes required being brave, that the rules she'd been following her whole life were often just other people's fears and judgments dressed up as wisdom. They'd broken the rules that night in Portland, not the important rules about being kind or honest or respectful, but the smaller, suffocating rules about what was appropriate and proper and expected, the rules that said she should keep suffering quietly rather than reaching for something better. The rules that said Ryan should sacrifice his own happiness out of misplaced loyalty. Those rules had never served them. Breaking them had been the best decision they'd ever made. Maya turned in Ryan's arms and kissed him. Tomorrow they'd face whatever came next. There would be more challenges, more judgments, more people who thought they knew better. But tonight, in their shared apartment, with moving boxes still unpacked and a future stretching out before them full of possibility, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt free, but free from other people's rules. Free from fear and guilt and the need to be perfect. Just free to be herself and choose happiness, even when that choice was complicated. Especially when that choice was complicated.